I'll introduce Joe and Emma. Joe and Emma, if you want to give a wave and say hello. Joe is our Green Therapy Development Officer at the moment. It's the new role that we're piloting. And Emma is our Head of Waste and Sustainability, isn't it? Okay. So we're going to talk today around green therapy and mental health services. So I'll just do some, hopefully if my slide will go on. Looks like, oh, there we go. So a bit of housekeeping to start. We're going to be recording this session. So hopefully if everybody's okay, press recording. You've got options for camera on or off. It's good to have people to have their cameras on so we can see faces, and it helps to sort of see that interaction and everything. But again, if you're equally comfortable, prefer to have it off, that is fine. But we're, encouraging people to be here. Chat, please use the chat function. If you've got anything to say, we really want to make this as interactive as possible. And the same with questions. We've talked about trying to leave some time at the end for questions. So if you've got any questions, put them in the chat. We'll try and monitor the chat. Kath's going to help us monitor the chat, and we'll try and give everybody time at the end to ask questions as they come up. Yeah. And please, like I say, make this interactive. So use your reactions on Teams, the different emojis, thumbs up, waves, anything that you need to do. And then just the last thing, just have on mute unless you're talking. And for those who joined, I was apologising in advance to people on the call for my noisy dog, so that he may start barking. So if I go on to mute quickly, I'll probably have, when I'm not speaking, I'll be on mute because he might be a little disruptive, but hopefully not. Okay, right. So if I can move that slide on somehow. There we go. So some introductions, who we are. So I've said who we are. We're working Bradford District Care Trust. And our project today, it's around talking about how we developed a role emerging placement within a sustainability team. And so we're going to try and talk about how the project has grown, how it started, how it's grown, and then what the next steps are. Okay. So just a bit about Bradford and Bradford District Care Trust. So Bradford, people will know, it's an area very known for its diversity and rich cultural and industrial heritage. We've got Bradford 25, it's got the City of Culture next year, which is quite exciting. And it's got a large population of about 647,000 registered, and it's growing. And whilst it's got a lot of diversity, we've got mixed urban and rural areas. We've got green spaces, beautiful Yorkshire Dales right on our doorstep, Ilkley Moor, and but then we've also got areas where it's very, very urban, and inner city Bradford, where there's lots of deprivation. So Bradford, it's got its challenges, it's got its diversity and its richness, but we're also really got high level of deprivation and social economic challenges. And we're probably one of the most deprived areas in City Bradford in the country. So we've got with that, we've got, related health challenges that we're trying to deal with as a system. So in the Care Trust, we're a mental health and community trust. So we provide all age services. We provide all mental health service in terms of mental health acute, specialist inpatients and community services, learning disabilities and CAMS. And then within our community, we've got community nursing, we've got 0 to 19s, health visiting school nursing, we've got community therapies, and then specialist dentistry as well. So we cover quite a large area. And for our AHPs, I think we're fairly small for AHPs compared to other trusts, but we've got approximately 280 whole-time equivalent registered AHPs, mainly OT and speech and language therapists, and then we've got physios, dietetics, podiatry, and art and music. So we're small in size, but we're very big in ambition, I wanted to put, because we're trying to do a lot in Bradford. It feels like we're trying to do a lot, and I'm quite a proud chief AHP. So we've got Ambition to Action, which is our trust strategy, and that talks about making our trust the best place to work, thinking about how we can provide the best quality services for our communities and how we can best use of our resources. So really thinking about sustainability in our green plan, which Emma's going to talk about, and how we can be the best partner. And we're really trying to talk about how we can create opportunities for people to be outside and in nature, and really bring nature as to embed it into all of our care planning across the services. So our Bradford District and Health Care Partnership, we're very much act as one. As many systems, that's our kind of strapline, act as one. So we're trying to do very much, trying to work very together, lots of co-production, collaboration, really thinking about how we can work collectively to drive things. And as AHPs, this is something that's really important to us. So it's a bit of contextual information. So I'll pass on to Emma, who can do the next couple of slides.
Thanks, Cathy. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. So, yeah, as Cathy said, I'm the NGO for Sustainability Manager at the Trust. And so I'm not an AHP, got no background in anything clinical at all. So I'm coming at this very much from the environmental, the sustainability standpoint. And depending on what sessions you've already been in this week, you may have seen this wheel before that's come out of Greener NHS, but I use it quite a lot. The three of us were actually in a board development session this morning, and I was kind of really trying to hammer home that a lot of what we're trying to do with the green therapy, because it's part of sustainable models of care. It's not just a nice to have, and for those of us who, we want it to be a few more flowers around or something. It is about it being low carbon and hopefully kind of lower cost and better for patients type of care. So, you're here probably because you're interested in the environmental side of things as well. So, I mean, I was interested actually. I had a look to see if I could do a little poll, and I don't think we can. But just curious as to whether most people here are from the allied health professions, or whether you've come from a sustainability background like I am, because the whole point of this talk is that we've brought the two different disciplines together, and I think it is starting to bear some fruits. And if we try and do it independently, we're not going to get where we need to be. So the point is that sustainable models of care, green therapy sort of fits within all of these wheels. It's very much about trying to keep people healthy in the first place, but then it can be part of the care, the treatment system. So with those right hand and two quadrants of the wheel, and then and showing that it's embedded as business as usual. So that was very much what we were talking to our board about this morning, about how do we make sure that green therapy is considered as part of people's care plans, and we get those benefits, because we were demonstrating that we all have our own interactions with nature. We don't go out and hang around in kind of tower blocks or kind of big concrete car parks. We tend to take ourselves in our free time to places that are, gardens, mountains, beaches, hillsides, places where there is nature. Okay, Cathy, are you able to move us on, please?
Yeah.
Thank you. So yeah, it's very much about health and well-being at the core of it. And as we know, in I don't know where, depending on your local authority area, health inequalities is a big deal for us at the moment in Bradford. It's very much at the heart of everything the Health and Care Partnership are doing in the different strands of work. And we know that people, when it comes to climate change, aren't all affected equally. And those that are more vulnerable won't be able to adapt the way that others will. So the environment and the biodiversity, so having greater tree coverage, for example, is a way that we can help with climate change adaptations. When we've got overheating in summer in years to come, those of us that are got shaded areas are going to be able to adapt and maybe cool down a bit compared to our inner city residents and patients. So we need to make sure that we're supporting our vulnerable communities. So if you are from a sustainability background, and even if you're not, you're probably aware that the UK is extremely nature depleted. And whilst I very much support the Greener NHS's zero carbon focus, it's not just about it. We want to make sure that biodiversity and all of those benefits that we can get are championed. So we can be part of the solution and not just part of the problem. And even though I've got no clinical background, I very much believe that kind of nature and nature connection and just access to the outdoors could really help us to speed up recovery, reduce readmissions, etc., etc. Okay. And then if you could move on again, please.
Okay.
So this is what, I know not everybody's going to be from a mental health background, but I just thought this is worth sharing. So this is the mental health care pathway that's included in a report, and I'll put the link in the chat, a document called Delivering a Net Zero Mental Health Service from the Royal College of Psychiatry. And what we did when this was being put together, this report, was looking at all of the different areas of a mental health care pathway and where it's high carbon. So all of the little bits, you know, the orange dots and then the blurb sort of next to it is where we think there's like high carbon intensity. And pretty much all of these things, if we were to look at doing increased green therapy, and by green therapy, I'm kind of meaning absolutely everything. So just from going for a walk with somebody to sitting and listening to the bird song to actually fully engaging and being immersed in some sort of green therapy could help us. So, for example, could help us reduce medication, very much could help us with our physical health impacts and reducing some of the comorbidity, etc., etc. So if we can get this right and if we can bed it in our care plans, we believe that not only is it going to make us more financially sustainable as a trust, but it's going to help make us a lower carbon and hopefully, let's say, reduce readmissions, reduce length of stay, and all those things that are important to our senior leaders. And I think I'm handing back to you, Cathy, for the next slide.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So thinking about the role emerging placement, so excuse the kind of the gardening analogy, but this is the kind of seed of an idea. Emma and I have been talking for a long time about the idea of how we can try and develop some kind of green nature-based therapy, the idea of NHS nature rangers, where how we could develop some kind of nature ranger within our trust. And you know, when Emma spoke to me initially about it, it was just like, yeah, this is just exactly something I want to do as somebody who actually loves, you know, being outside is part of my DNA. And as an OT, it's just something I'm really, really keen that we really grow, because it's so important to try and look at how we can think about the benefits from nature-based activities for someone's recovery. So we've been talking about it for ages. There's lots of talking about the potential of green therapy. We really feel that it could really make a difference, especially in some of our mental health services where maybe access to nature is more difficult. But if this was part of their care plan, what a difference it could make to the quality of their care and to their recovery and to their health and well-being. So we knew what we wanted, but it was really hard trying to get funding for it, to do something where we could get some funding where we could really show the impact. So we needed to build this case for change. And we've got very strong partnerships, like I say, you know, in Bradford, we've got that Act as One philosophy, very good relationships with our local HEIs, and especially occupational therapist. And I'm always identifying areas for role emerging placements with the university. So they often come to me with ideas. And Emma and I were talking, actually, this could be a really good opportunity for students to come and try and develop this. So that's where we try to then think about, let's have a role emerging placement within our sustainability team. So that's where it began. So we had last year, we had 2 role emerging placements. The first one, we had 3 students who were working with us between January and March. And it was based mainly in our inpatient services. And I think it's probably fair to say there was a lot of learning from this, because for the students, it took a bit of time to find actually what the role was and to really develop their project and to feel that they were achieving something. And I think it was because it was just a new area. And for us within the sustainability team, it was new to have OT students within that team as well. So, but it was an inpatient focus. And what we focused on was testing out and nurturing some of those initial ideas of, you know, if we had kind of nature-based therapy within our inpatient services, what would it look like? Where do we need to focus it on? Who do we need to focus it with? And how could we really achieve the most benefits? So they developed some resources, such as prompt sheets for staff to use with our service users. so we can really think about how we incorporate access to nature within our care planning, within our assessments and interventions. And they developed a service user questionnaire to get some feedback from our patient group about actually what are the challenges for people around access to nature at the moment. What do they feel they would need, that they would benefit from within their care? So they developed a bit of an OT assessment tool. They started really thinking about green therapy and what that would look like, and developing an interest checklist, which was very much based around nature and sustainability. And then in April to June, we had 2 more students. So we had Priscilla and we had Joe. And Joe, I can lead into Joe for the next few slides. So came along, and I think it was probably, I would probably say this placement we felt, was maybe a little bit more successful. It was partly because Emma and I, we kind of knew a bit more what we were doing, but we also had more of a focused idea about what this could look like. And it was very much building the case for change for this placement. So it was looking at, yes, we really know there's a lot of evidence for green therapy. We've started to know and understand how it can really benefit our group, our inpatient population, our mental health services. But we needed to try and build a bit of a business case. So what we developed was Joe and Priscilla, and I'll lead into Joe in a moment, but we did an options appraisal to look at if we were to have nature-based therapy or nature rangers, or what that would look like. What kind of how could this be funded? What different options could we consider to look at how we could achieve this? And we also developed some flashcards, and this was something that Priscilla worked on, looking at the really nice resource that people could use in their conversations with service users when they were planning their care, to really look at how they could plan to incorporate nature within their goal setting. And that's where we're at. So I will lead now into Joe, because this is where Joe can talk more about his role and then what led to those discussions with Natural England.
So I'm Joe, I'm the OT here. So yeah, as Cathy said, we did the placement, and part of it was to present this options appraisal to the board, and as part of it we had discussions with Natural England, and that sort of led to them funding this role for 6 months originally. So this is the initially when I started this role, kind of did a survey to find out what green therapy was already happening within our trust and what people thought of it. So you can see the results there. The OTs were pretty aware of it, and we're using it somewhat, but it was kind of a bit ad hoc. Most of them knew how beneficial it was to the service users, and they were aware of how beneficial it was to themselves. When I did the survey with the medics, it was a bit of a different story, because they didn't really have any knowledge of what I was talking about. They never really heard the term. Once it was explained to them, they kind of got it, and they were like, oh yeah, okay, now we know what it is. We're aware of the benefits to both mental and physical health. They all were very keen on using it more with their service users, and they all wanted more training in it. And that is something that I've found over and over again, regardless of the profession that I've been dealing with. They're just like, oh, well, we know this is great, but we don't really know how to utilize it, so we could do with more training somehow. So yeah, that is where we stood at the beginning. If you move on to the next slide. Thank you. So yeah, some of the things that we were already doing within the trust, we do have walking groups going. One of the issues we have is that they tend to be more for sort of a certain demographic, more sort of middle class white people tend to take it up. So we've got a bit of an issue there with diversity. Also, a lot of the ones that were most popular stopped during COVID and then never came back, unfortunately. In terms of gardening, you'll see there on the right, there's a picture of our community allotments, which we spent a lot of time and money putting together, but then which we've not been able to use much because of health and safety requirements, and a requirement that all our staff do a 3-day training course, which they just didn't have time to do. So that's been a a big barrier towards actually using it. One of the issues we've found is that often when there is something going on in terms of green therapy, it will be down to an individual staff member who has an interest in it. So we had a really good gardening group set up at one of our inpatient sites, but as soon as the OT set it up left, it just sort of ceased to exist. It has come back now since I've been in post, but yeah, that's another barrier, especially when it comes to, you know, OTs rotating all the time. It means that they spend ages setting something up, and then, you know, whoever replaces them might have no interest in that. So one of the issues is how do we make it more sustainable? We've got very limited animal therapy. Unfortunately, it is right now just limited to one location. We've got therapy dog and we have some therapy rabbits. But unfortunately, the therapy dog had to be the OT's own dog, and she had to do like the training for it in her own time. And that means she does not have the time to take it round other wards, and all the other wards really, you know, are begging for more therapy dogs, but we just can't find any at the moment, unfortunately. There's kind of sports going on here and there, but it's all, again, it's a bit ad hoc. And yeah, as I've already mentioned, the community allotment. So there was stuff happening, but yeah, it's all, there's not much equality across the wards. It's like some wards are doing a lot, other wards are doing nothing, and it just depends on the staff members' own interest, I guess. If you want to move on, Cathy. So these are some of the things that we have sort of trialed or tried to introduce. So one of the things there, you can see a very enthusiastic OT student trialing out our VR headset. So we got loaned one of these headsets, and it's got a program which is all about immersing yourself in nature. So you can visit different locations, and then you completely in this, you know, virtual reality world, you can see 360, and you can, it's a pretty immersive experience because you can hear the sounds of 360 as well. So it's pretty incredible. I don't know if anybody's tried VR, but it is pretty incredible, and it probably is the future of everything. So so yeah, that's been really successful. People really liked it. Service users and staff, because, you know, it is something that's new and novel, and it really got people interested in what we're doing. It's particularly useful for when you have service users who can't leave a ward, so you bring the nature to them if you can't take them to nature. But we're also using it as kind of a stepping stone for encouraging service users to want to get out there into nature, because we're having our own videos made of the wildlife locations across West Yorkshire. So that is going to happen, and then hopefully that'll be more relatable, because at the moment the videos we're using are all of the south of England. We obviously, part of this is to get people more engaged with nature in any way we can. So we've been decorating bird boxes with service users. We wanted to build them with service users, but again, we weren't allowed. It was sort of deemed too much of a risk. So we settled on decorating them, and they will go up around our sites. And we're trying to encourage our service users to kind of keep an eye on them and do some bird watching. And maybe if we're lucky, we can install a camera in one eventually, so we could have sort of a feed that they could watch and see, yeah, what's happening. As Cathy mentioned, we've used the flashcards, which we sort of originally developed during placement. You can see an example there with the otter on it. So they are just to give a sort of visual idea to service users of what we can do, because I think sometimes it's very hard for them to sort of understand what green therapy means. I mean, if none of our doctors know, then how will any of our service users know what it is? So this is like, that's just one example, but there's lots of different ones with like sports or, you know, walking groups, that sort of thing. And it just gives them a better visual representation of what it is, and hopefully encourages them. And the back of it will have more information on sort of like, what does this bring you, and who do you do it with, and things like that, just to make it a bit easier. We've got our gardening groups going again, so that is happening now, and hopefully we can expand that to all the wards, because again, one of the issues we have is that there's often not much coordination between wards. So you'll have, you know, one ward doing a lot of gardening, and then the next ward they'll be doing nothing, but it might be because they've got no equipment, or even they don't realize that we have an on-site garden courtyard that our therapists can use. But just some of our staff don't even know that it exists, so it's kind of getting the message out there. We have held a nature connectedness workshop, which was done through the West Yorkshire Wildlife Trust, and that was really popular, and it involved, it was for staff, and it involved us going outside and learning basically how we can just use whatever is right in front of us outside any of our premises to do nature activities with service users. But we also did a lot indoors about, well, if you can't leave the ward, or if you can't leave wherever you may be, what can you do just by, say, looking out the window in terms of nature? That was really popular. One of the things that we keep coming back to is that everybody, staff, would like more training in all this. So that workshop, you know, was inundated with members of staff who wanted to take part. And people are still asking me if we're going to repeat it because it was so popular. So, you know, the interest is there, in other words. Use of our community allotment, as I mentioned, it kind of stopped being used because of the different health and safety regulations around it, but we have now got that being used again, which is really good because it's just a really good resource that we have, and it'd be such a shame not to use it. We've created an internal SharePoint page for our intranet because, again, to go back to say, like when I was chatting to the doctors, they were like, this is all great, but how do we find out more information on this? And it's kind of a ridiculous situation where I was like, well, right now it is just me, you know, that you come to find out what's going on. So I've just made a central resource, basically. I mean, as we might discuss later, I can't remember if it's in, but what would be really handy is to know what is going on sort of nationwide in terms of green therapy, because I don't really know it. You know, it's like I've spoken to Nottingham NHS as part of this project, and I've spoken to Devon NHS, but you know, if you asked me what was going on round the corner in Calderdale, I wouldn't be able to tell you because as far as I know, there's no national page where you can just see what everybody's doing in terms of green therapy. We are opening a seed library within our main library at one of our inpatient sites. So that's just a central location, you know, where you can go, and any wards who want to do gardening groups can go and collect what they need. And the idea is that staff are encouraged to donate what they're not using at home to that, to try and keep it sustainable. And yeah, one of the big issues we have is community. It's very hard to get things going in terms of green therapy in community because of staffing issues. And so we are very reliant on the third sector, but we definitely need to improve those links somehow. So would you like to move on, Cathy? Yes. I've probably talked about a lot of these barriers already, but yeah. Lack of coordination between inpatient and community. Everything's a lot easier to do at the moment in inpatient because, you know, you've got everybody there and it's just easy to implement things. But we really need to improve that sort of link between patient and community and that pathway. Because if people are doing loads of green therapy on the wards and it's really beneficial to them, how do we guarantee that that continues once you're in community? So that's an issue we've got. If anybody has any thoughts on that, would be interested. We have, like I've mentioned already, a lot of this comes down to what is the engagement from individual members of staff. If they've got a particular interest in green therapy, then great, we can often have things going on the ward, but then once they leave, it sort of just stops. And it's a real shame, especially when it's been very beneficial to patients, that they suddenly just lose that resource, whether it be, you know, the walking groups or horticultural groups. So there's an element there of how do we make it more sustainable and completely embed it so that doesn't happen anymore. So obviously one of the issues when I originally started, it was like a 5-month project. So it has been extended now, but obviously it was difficult to get anything long-term wise going. So yeah, and as I have mentioned, there is this issue where a lot of wards don't talk to each other. And so, you know, we've got one ward with a lot of garden equipment who are doing no gardening, and then we've got a ward right next door who no gardening equipment who want to do something, and they never talk to each other, never right next to each other. Is how do we improve that? How do we, I mean, part of it is just getting the message out there, you know, like I say, now we've got the SharePoint page and people are kind of becoming aware of what we're doing. Hopefully it'll get a bit easier. We've heard anecdotally that there is a diversity issue. Like Cathy mentioned, Bradford's one of the most diverse areas probably in the whole country. And yet, I think most of our green therapy uptake is probably kind of a very specific demographic of sort of white people and especially middle class. And so it's how to make that more available to everybody. That's something we need to look into. The bureaucracy, as I've mentioned, our allotment wasn't being used because of health and safety regulations. We couldn't do the bird box building because of health and safety regulations. There's sometimes a bit of a pushback to sort of the animal therapy and things like that because of health and safety and infection prevention. But I know, for example, Devon NHS are doing more things where they're actually building things with their service users on the inpatient sites to then use in nature. So it's kind of like, why can some trusts do that and we can't? So that's another issue. Like I say, lack of knowledge of what other trusts are doing, what's going on around the country. That would be really handy to know and to swap ideas and to just, be able to say, well, this trust is doing this, so why can't we? And then a big question that we struggled with is how do we measure any of this? Which I don't know if anybody has any insight or experience with that, but it's very difficult to use standardized outcome measures when it comes to this sort of therapy and with this sort of demographic. So that is something we've got to address and think about more. You want to move on, Cathy? Yes, so this is where we're heading now. So we're kind of in the short term, we're trying to improve the training because that is just something that keeps coming up again and again and again, that they would like to do more if they knew more about it, if they understood it more. We've got the gardening groups, the seed library, the flashcards, the VR headset. They are going to film Yorkshire locations. If there's ever another good day of weather in Yorkshire, then they will do that, but that's what's holding it up at the moment. In the meantime, one issue we have is, especially in our community hubs, I will be asking them about what green therapy they're doing, and they'll be unaware of anything going on locally. So sometimes it can just be as simple as just mapping what is out there, what is nearby. We need to promote it better because, again, everybody's saying, well, we really like the idea, but we don't really understand what it is, or we don't have enough information. There are links with other trusts to find out what's going on elsewhere. Yeah, we've done the SharePoint page. And then long-term wise, we're trying to strengthen connections with the third sector. We're trying to embed this more into the syllabus at the local university. So it's just like when students graduate, they don't have to ask what green therapy is. They already know, the possibility of turning this more into a research project for everything we're doing. Using the VR more and potentially making our own videos. So we could just, we could be a lot more bespoke. Potentially doing a roadshow to target certain areas where we might feel the demographic are not getting enough green therapy or not understanding fully what it is. Everybody's more keen on animal therapy. So the wards are always asking me about that. So if we can expand that at all, that is something we're keen to do. Looking at the benefits to staff, because it is beneficial to staff as well as the service users. So if we can kind of get the staff on board and understanding themselves from their own experience, then it'll make them more likely to use it. So we are looking into doing a staff allotment at the moment, for example. And then, yeah, better incorporation into care plans for service users. Okay, Cathy?
So, yeah, I'm just with the laptop round. I'm conscious of time, and I know we've got our 5-minute warnings up, so I'll rattle through the last couple of slides. Basically, what we're trying to do is from those early green shoots of us getting a role emerging placement, and not really understanding much about OT. The OTs on the that came to us not really understanding much about sustainability and certainly sustainable models of care. We've managed to kind of work together to develop something, get some external funding to get to where we are. Hopefully keep growing it. So what we really want, I heard this phrase from somebody else, I've totally stolen it with pride, to have a natural health service rather than a national health service. We want our clinicians to really embed it in what we do, and we did get some really good engagement from our board executives this morning when we spoke about this, because there is lots of academic evidence about better mental health and physical health outcomes. We do have violence and aggression on the ward, and we believe that it could help reduce that and be lower carbon care. So why would you not do it? The problem is we just need to evidence it, and probably evidence the financial benefit. For example, the shorter bed days, etc., etc. So Cathy, can you move on? And that's us. So yeah, like Dave, I put in the chat to somebody who's had to shoot off. If you are from an OT background and you've got Royal Emerging Placements with your local university, I would encourage you to reach out to the sustainability team, because even if it's not green therapy, there might be another Royal Emerging Placement that could be offered within the sustainability team, because we very much, I think, that have similar kind of outlooks and ethics in terms of how we're trying to, the services we want to deliver for our patients. So yeah, over to you guys with any questions for Cathy, Jo, or myself in the last few minutes.
I'd like to say thank you very much. There's been quite a lot of interaction on the chat, so thank you for answering those along the way, and obviously sharing emails. That final slide, I will share the links in the chat in a minute, but I can see that people have got their hands raised. Laura, I think, would you like to start?
Yeah, thank you all. That was great.